Hello and welcome back to Widowed AF. You're here with Rosie Gill-Moss and I have a guest today all the way from America. We're going to be speaking with David Kanifogel. So welcome, David. Thank you ever so much for joining us today, and really excited to have both an American and a male on the podcast. And I'm also really interested to hear about the 8 children that you have. So we will get to that in time. But for now, hello.
Hi, so nice to meet you, Rosie. We were in that first Facebook Hot Young Widows Club spin-off group, I think 5 years ago.
Yes, we were.
And I hope we'll talk about how helpful that was to me and the things I've gotten out of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've almost known each other for a long time, and it's so nice.
Yeah, we've all, I think I mentioned it before on here, we joined all around the same time. It was a group, an American group. There was a few Brits in there, myself included, obviously. And we kind of closed the group, didn't we? So we remained in there together on the same timeline and trajectory. And it's been really, I don't know, people doing this, I'm actually getting to speak to people face to face, which is amazing. And I'm sort of thinking, why didn't I do this before? But I've always been a bit averse to things like FaceTime, having to adjust quite quickly now. But yeah, it was a hugely important part of my early days. And actually watching people kind of rise back up again is really empowering to see.
I completely agree.
I will shut up.
I call it a cohort. I don't know. Somehow cohort is a word that
I like
feels
that.
like so that
alumni.
And I've told people a lot when they ask me, did you join any support groups? I said no, but I had this weird spin-off of a thing that somehow got closed, and that's important, I think. So we almost all were the same timing-ish. And the value that I always say I get out of it, and I still do, is seeing people talk about their struggles that I don't necessarily have, but cannot empathize with. And even seeing somebody struggle with something that you're not and saying, oh, actually, that's not one of my struggles, just makes you feel less lonely when you are dealing with the things that you are struggling with. And I think it's a wonderful place that people share things. I remember very early joking with everybody, also how sex positive it was. I don't know, that's just a fun memory of what that group was. And it's just been this wonderful thing that I'm still part of, and I still check in on every once in a while, and it's amazing. People I've never met.
And actually, I agree with you. Again, we talk about it on here quite a bit, that feeling of the isolation and being the troll under the bridge. And within the confines of that group, you were sort of safe to share the I suppose almost like we do here, but in little kind of incremental bits on Facebook posts, and share the stuff that you perhaps weren't comfortable talking about with anybody else. And I to be honest, I love the name. That I just thought it was much like I've done with this, kind of giving the whole widowhood a little bit of a twist in order to appeal to people like us, which it did.
Yes, I 100% agree. Yeah, the feeling of shame, like there's something wrong with us. You can't get around it, and seeing other people, again, throwing snippets of things that we just had nowhere else to put because no one else could hear those words and really understand or not freak out. You know, like well-meaning people would hear us say something and get very nervous, and we hear ourselves say something and we just say, that sounds terrible.
Cool. Oh yeah, me too.
Right. Or that, or whatever it is, whatever, like you're just like the validation of all the crazy things that you hear and see and do. And I mean, you're doing that with this podcast. It's amazing. I've sent the link to this podcast to young widows new young widows that people call. I get calls and I say, oh, my friend's cousin, whatever, lost their young spouse. And so one of the things I give them now, one of the resources is this podcast. Again, just to hear people talking about all these things and just feel like there's nothing wrong with you, that this is kind of normal given what's going on.
I used to feel that maybe it would be too soon for a lot of kind of fresher, newer widows. But the actual feedback I'm getting is that people are finding it really helpful very early on. And I wasn't sure how it would land because obviously I'm coming at this 5 years in, but I'm in quite a good place. And that can feel, I mean, I don't know whether I'd been quite resentful of that idea back in the very early bits, right in the kind of eye of the storm. But I think perhaps because we do acknowledge that the grief travels with you, we're not sort of like, oh, well, I'm remarried, therefore that part of my life is over and I'm fine. Because that's, of course, not the case. There's a huge amount of trauma and grief everywhere I go, but I'm also able to be happy. And I don't know, I think there's power in knowing that perhaps there's some light at the end of the tunnel when you're walking through this horrible path.
I think you said that perfectly well. This never gets not complicated, I think. And I think that's one of the books that I read when I was a fresh widow was It's Okay That You're Not Okay. And the message that I got from that book, and that has really been like the bulwark of my strength, is
Yeah.
of course this is crazy. What do you mean? Like, no wonder you're a mess, and no
Yeah.
wonder things feel out of control, and no wonder you have conflicting thoughts and emotions, and when it's at its worst, no wonder it's at its worst, and when it's feeling okay, no wonder it's feeling okay. That's something that it never gets uncomplicated. Even like you said, even now, being happy, you can be
Yeah.
happy, and also it's still complicated.
Yeah.
And I think for fresh widows, sometimes seeing somebody who, we all want it to be complicated because it's a way of holding on. I think it's a little bit of our not acceptance to say, no, I'll never get over this.
Yeah.
I
Absolutely. And you
think
feel
that's
like
something
you're
we
meant
all
to.
feel.
Mm.
Say it again.
Anyway, David, we need to get on and hear your
Yes.
story.
Okay.
Chat away for hours. I know. Right. Come on then. Hit us with it,
Okay.
David. What brought you into this rather snotty but full of lovely people club?
Yes. So I was married to Hindi. Hindi was a wonderful, smart, amazing, thoughtful, bright, energetic woman who I met when we were both in college. She grew up in a neighborhood that not a lot of people went to college. She was the first in her family, and she kind of didn't have any friends who went to college. And when she was in college, we happened to meet each other very glancingly. I was this friend who did go to college and could text late at night about her weird struggles with her professors. That's how we became friends first. We eventually started dating when Hindi bought tickets to an off Broadway show. It was actually about, I think it was an Irish show, or I don't know if it was an American show written about Ireland, called The Lieutenants of Inishmore. And we went and we saw that show. She had no friends who kind of wanted to see an off Broadway play with her. And I was up for it. And that was retroactively our first date. We got married in 2007. We had our first kids in 2010, and those were triplets. Uh,
What?
yes,
Triplet.
I would say it was basically our doctor. Hindi was not sure. She was coming off the pill, and her period wasn't coming back exactly right. And our doctor gave her something, not telling us that it greatly increased the chance of multiples. Like, we had no
Goodness
clue.
me.
So anyway, our triplets were born in 2010. Our next one was born in 2014, and then a little boy in 2016. This whole time, Hindi, since she was about 16 or 17, was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. Crohn's disease is a chronic, like, inflammatory bowel disease that can be very complicated. Hindi's mom has had it and still has it, can often require medication or surgeries. Hindi never had any of those. She would have stomach pain sometimes, but for the most part, it was totally managed. One day in 2018, her stomach was hurting, and it just kind of kept hurting. She was feeling dizzy. We eventually decided to go to a hospital. We were in kind of a more rural area of New York, and like, we had to go to the regional hospital because that's the closest we could reach. They did a scan and said, she is in massive sepsis. We need to do emergency surgery right now. The surgery itself was kind of like technically successful, but she was so septic that within like 4 hours of the surgery, she died.
Gee.
Like, the entire episode took maybe 24 hours.
Oh my
All
God.
of our kids were with us and his parents. The kids went to sleep having a normal ass day. Pardon my
Yeah.
language.
You don't need
And
to
then
apologize.
in the morning, by the time they woke up, we had a specialist who works for families who are dealing with cancer and all kinds of things, who came and sat down with me and them to tell them what happened. That's it. It was very
Jeez.
sudden, very akin to like car crash.
Hmm.
I've spoken to some other folks. In fact, I was on the phone professionally with a man last week who mentioned something about he was inheriting something from his late wife. So of course, I started talking to him about widowhood,
Of course.
and he asked me how Hindi had died, and I told him, and he said that story shouldn't happen in a first world country. Like, it's so incredibly rare for that to happen so fast, so quick, that a hospital can't take care of it. So it was just a fluke out of nowhere disaster.
It's absolutely terrifying, isn't it? I mean, you saw, so was it related to the condition that she had? That,
Yes, yeah, yeah. So sure, essentially, her large intestine was inflamed again for this underlying thing, and ruptured. And when your intestines rupture, it's like when your appendix burst. You have septic material flooding your entire abdomen, just looking to
ouch.
cause problems.
Oh, the poor woman. And how old was she?
32.
32. Oh my goodness, 32 and five children.
5 children, yeah, and, like, prime of her career kinds of things. Hindi had a doctorate in literacy education. She was, like, a passionate teacher, not just in the classroom, but she wrote curricula and was just creative in how teaching should be done. Again,
Yeah.
she was also a classroom teacher, but she was like a teacher's teacher, and she was just coming into her own. It was really unfair.
And it's that, I mean, like, any death is horrible, but my personal experience, as you will know, is of the suddenness of it. Of,
Yeah.
as you discussed, and for the children, 1 minute everything is completely fine, and the next minute everything is different. It's everything. They may live in the same house, go to the same school, but they are changed forever. And whilst most children can be supported and guided through it, they are not the same as they were. We're not the same. Nobody's the same, are they?
Yeah, I
Right.
completely agree. I kind of remember, I think, was it you saying the story where you started making tea or asking if
Yeah,
people
offering
wanted
tea.
tea?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
worried I didn't have a
So,
bra on. Really
yeah,
stupid things.
I remember, so I was in the hospital. The image in my mind is the doc. It's like out of a movie, a doctor walking through doors and shaking his head. And Hindy's family was with us. I think my parents were there by that time. Everybody else broke down, and I was just filled with, I need to go, this calm thought at this tone. I need to go home and take care of my kids now. Like, you
Mhm.
guys can cry. You guys have the availability to break down right now.
I've
I
got shit to
don't.
do.
I remember asking one of, like, the assistant surgeons, like, "Do you know the stages of grief? Because I just want to know what to expect." Like, in that same, like, I know I have to take care of business right now tone. Yeah, just a little. I mean, obviously, out of body that whole day and the whole next day. But yeah, a certain kind of calmness that, in looking back, looks alien. You just enter that weird mode where nothing's real.
Mhm.
You're hoping it's a dream, but you know it's not.
I
You're
remember
just,
feeling
like,
like I was
stumbling through.
on TV, that I was in some sort of made
Yes.
TV drama with, lots of awful things happening, and I couldn't quite, that's, yeah, like a barrier between you and reality. I think it's called disassociation, but I certainly hadn't heard of it back then. I just felt very, very strange. So,
Yeah, I never liked watching those kinds of TV moments. They always felt too hard before, and now I hate them.
yeah, I
I
can't
can
watch a drama
barely.
now.
The we Hindi and I used to watch Doctor Who. I'll throw in a
Oh,
wrinkle
did
for
you?
this, 'cause as an American, we used to like watching Doctor Who, and after a while, maybe after like a year and a half, I'm like, you know what? That's something I enjoyed. I can keep watching it. I'm
Mhm.
gonna go back, and I went into the episode, and it's literally an episode where a young woman gives her life for something. I'm like, nope,
No.
that's it. I had to turn off Doctor Who for another year before I could get back to it. Yeah.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
I'm
you
pleased
just
to hear
can't.
it, Doctor.
You don't want to deal with, like, the realness of things when you've dealt with something so real.
I didn't watch
It's doesn't give
properly
you
watch
anything.
TV for ages, and even now, I don't find I can lose myself in it quite the same. And
I
certainly,
watch comedies almost exclusively now. Like, that's all I want to see. My first 6 months of I when I my first 6 months of doing nothing was me on the couch watching the American show Psych, which is a very light-hearted comedy, Sherlock Holmesian kind of things.
yeah,
And even now, I just want to watch comedies. That's all I want. Don't give me any drama. Forget
I
it.
can't watch anything scary or gruesome these days, and I certainly can't watch anything with a water-based death in it or anything like that.
Yes.
I've basically become a massive wuss who spends a lot of the time sort of behind a cushion watching things that aren't even that scary. So,
I don't like any medical things people talk about, even sometimes on your show,
mm,
where people are talking about oncology, which I have no reference to. The feeling of hospitals makes me so
how
crazy.
do you manage that with kids? Because presumably in the last 5 years, you've had to go to hospitals or medical areas that's, well, you've had more children. We'll come on to that in a minute. But did you find sort of stepping back into a medical setting quite traumatic after this?
Yes, 100%.
Mm.
About 3 weeks after Hindi passed away, it was the beginning of a school year. And the beginning of school years is when kids share viruses constantly. And one
No,
of my
no.
kids started throwing up. And I think that she was probably the 4-year-old. I think she was 4. She started vomiting and she threw up like 12 times. So I took her to the hospital and I brought her in and I said, okay, here's my daughter. Also, can you please call someone from social services? Because I feel like I have a handle on this right now, but I am very recently traumatized by this. So
Mm.
if you could just have somebody, to my memory, no one came down, maybe because I did stay stable that day and just a lot of deep breathing to feel okay in that moment.
But you know what? The fact that
But
you
yeah,
can
I still get those
foresight.
disaster thoughts and like the imaginations of the worst possible
Oh
scenario
God.
when your kid doesn't answer the phone or
Oh
something.
my
It's
God,
terrible.
or a friend or anybody. I know. And most people who I'm very close to know that if I've called more than twice, they really have to let me know that just tell me you're alive. That's all I want to
Yeah, smart,
know. That's all I
smart.
want. I'm not keeping tabs on you. I just want to know you're alive. Now, also, there's an obvious difference for you grieving because you've got your 5 children, but you're also a bloke. Now, I am very aware of how amazing dads are. And, I'm married to an amazing dad who raised his daughter alone when his wife died. But 5 kids is a lot. It's a lot for anybody, and it's a lot when you're grieving. And I suppose I don't know what it's like where you are, but over here we do get men, go to, baby groups and stuff, but it's different. I can immerse myself in the school run chat and go for coffees and do I did all the baby groups with Tabby when she was little, but is it different for a man? Did you find that it was harder to kind of ingratiate yourself into those circles?
I think so a little bit, not in terrible ways. So the first thing to say is that I was always an involved dad
Mm,
before.
makes a huge
I
difference.
I've
No.
I've been like teleworking for many years, way before Hindi died or COVID or anything. So I was usually the one who was home when the kids got home from school, and then Hindi got home, about an hour later. So even that, just the experience of them walking up for them of walking off the bus and dad is home, that was
That's it.
continuity for
Yeah.
them. That was very important. The big number one thing I had to learn how to do was cook because I had no experience with it whatsoever. Hindi would ask me to cut a salad and I would kind of not understand what that meant. Like, how small should the cucumbers be? I don't know. Do I peel them? Do I not? And it was everything. Cooking felt like magic and just a magic I didn't have.
Yeah.
So what I did have
It's
was,
a nightmare.
yeah, what I did have was a meal train that was set up very early, mostly from parents of kids that
What's
my
the
kids went
meal
to school
train?
with.
I don't think I've heard that expression over here.
Oh, meal train is a wonderful thing. There are like websites where people can just go on and say, okay, I'm making this family a meal on that Tuesday night. We just had it now because we had a baby. Like our family and friends and our community is really great about that. If you have something, someone will start a meal train for you and you'll have a week or 2 or 3 where people let's just take dinner off the plate for this family right now. Like it's just one less thing for them to worry about it. So our meal train for our baby just ended and it was really so nice. I needed this meal train that I just had for our baby way less because I can cook. And yesterday, like there was no meal train and I made dinner. It's fine.
Brilliant
But
idea.
it's really helpful. And in that moment, it was essential. Like I would not have survived without that. And what I did was slowly learn to cook kind of by like remembering things Hindi had done and being like, I think this is what's going on. And now I think of myself as a good cook, but not for adults. I don't know how to make adult food.
A fine line in
What I can do
no.
is feed a very small army of children wholesome food that I
Your
can
food, you'll
do
get wholesome
easily.
food and mine are
Yeah, exactly. And I thought about writing a cookbook. If I market it to men, it's called How to Cook for Dads. If I market it to women, I think I would call it My Wife Died and I Had to Learn How to Cook.
brilliant.
I
I
think
like
that
it.
would get, yeah.
I like it.
So that was some of like the domestic stuff and cleaning and laundry. We had some cleaning help before, so that continued. I think I started learning how to do laundry and like just surviving and getting all that stuff done. I spent most of my early hours during the day just learning how to run a house and
Yeah.
all of the appointments and after school things and knowing which people to ask for rides to things.
It's the mental load as well, isn't it? That used to be shared
It's a
between
huge
two of
mental load.
you. Because
A
I find
hundred percent.
the what we would affectionately call the blue jobs. I did, mow the lawn, things like this, just things
Mm.
that I that just were kind of automatically his jobs to do. He controlled, that makes it sounds awful, but he was managed the house finances. And
Right.
I mean, actually, the day he died, I sort of having one of those very frivolous conversations in the school playground. And I went, oh, if Ben dropped dead tomorrow, I'd have no idea who to pay the electric to. Not knowing, obviously, that it had already happened. But that level of kind of lack of involvement in the two sides of the household. I mean, Ben was a very
Yep.
hands-on dad, but we did things, we did different things you do in a relationship, don't you?
Yes, 100%. And then I want to get back to also the relationship with the other moms in the community.
Mm.
We all of our classes have a WhatsApp chat
Yeah, same.
for like everyone. You guys have that too. We always call them mom chats, and now suddenly it's mom chat and me.
No.
And that was always really fun and funny to me. And everybody was gracious and thoughtful. I mean, not everybody, but almost everybody was gracious and thoughtful. People reach out to see what they could do. People that I didn't really know very well, even just, they happen to have a kid in my kid's grade. I'm very grateful for all of those people, mostly the women, because they're the ones who are involved in
It
what was
sounds
going
like you
on
had
and
a
being
lot of
helpful.
support, actually, a reassuring amount of support, which is it's really nice to hear. What about sort of emotional support? Because obviously you talk about practical support, but you've got 5 kids who don't have a mum anymore, or a mom, sorry, and that's going to leave a mark. And I don't want to pry too much into your children's business, but it must have been very, very hard to manage their emotions at that time, and to reassure them that they were safe, and that you were going to be around. Because I know I had to do a lot of that.
That's interesting. I remember you saying that on previous podcasts as well. My kids never expressed that part of things. I don't know why. 2 of them, I didn't put them into therapy right away, any of them. I think the cues I got from the people I spoke to was see what happens
Yep.
first, see if there's any behavioral changes. So at about 6 months, 2 of the triplets were having behavioral issues in
Can I just
school.
ask, the triplets, are they all boys, all
Yeah.
girls, or a mix?
2 girls and a boy.
2 girls and a boy.
And then the next one is a girl and the next one is a boy.
Oh,
So
nice.
they're now 13, 3 13-year-olds, an 8-year-old, and a 6-year-old.
I'm sorry, 3 13-year-olds.
Yeah, yeah. They're very funny. It's a very, when Hindi died, I remember that day thinking, I was already my life was already interesting enough. Like
Yeah.
I didn't
You didn't
need
need any
this.
more drama, did
We
you?
were already having this crazy, weird, good time. Did not need additional weird things, circus freak show things to happen to us. But okay, so my kids, 2 of the triplets, eventually I did put into therapy, talk therapy. I think that served them really well. The other 3 really still have not needed anything like that. I'll give myself credit for being very good at the beginning of just talking about Hindi whenever she came up in natural conversation, whether it's a memory or I'm feeling sad about it, or this is a weird thing, and oh, if mom was here, and just allowing that to happen and not making it weird.
Yeah,
Because for them, it was all organic emotions, right? They were in control of nothing that they were feeling, and just validating that and allowing that to be a thing that you were feeling and that we're talking about. We do that now. I always say we bring up Hindi, we talk about Hindi whenever she comes up in conversation, and that's pretty often. Even
Yeah. I mean, the listeners can't see me nodding my head furiously as you're saying this, because as time has gone on, and actually much like you in the early days, I was advised by my brother's girlfriend at the time. Her dad had died when she was young. And she had said, please, please talk about him. We weren't allowed to, we didn't, and it was awful. So although it's been difficult sometimes, now I find it very natural to talk about them. And Monty, my eldest, is discovering sort of the same music that his dad likes. So we often have chats about that. And
that's so great.
yeah, I really think it's important, because it's, if they feel they can only talk about the person that they've lost when it's heightened emotion and they're really sad, it sort of keeps them in that container almost. Whereas what you want is to bring that vibrancy back to life. I mean, sadly, we can't literally do that, but you know what I mean, by remembering the awesome stuff and the fun stuff, and not just the really shitty pain. It
I
actually
100% agree.
going.
I totally agree. I'm sorry, I don't mean to talk over you.
This makes a change for me doing it.
I completely agree with you, and I think it actually also helps in those moments of heightened emotion to know. But when you talk about the person all the time, they know that in a heightened emotional state, I can also talk about it.
Yeah.
What is scary for them, or what's potentially an issue, is when they're in a heightened emotional state and they still feel like they can't talk about it because this is a taboo topic. That seems like a very scary moment. and you
Yeah, and
really don't
somebody
want that to
told
happen.
my eldest quite early on. I mean, they were well-meaning. It wasn't done with any malice or harm, but they told him he was the man of the house and that he must look after me.
Mm.
And he then found it very difficult to share his trauma and his feelings and his sadness with me because he didn't want to upset me, which also speaks volumes about the kind of kid I got. But also it was too
I
much
I
pressure.
think I agree again, and I think this is something that a lot of men are taught,
Mm,
not just small children who've lost their dad. Men are often I do think it's a taught thing. I don't think it's a necessarily natural thing. That's why I say men are taught this often.
yeah.
You have to be strong, you have to be caregiver, you have to not have emotional breakdowns, you have to be in control of your emotions at all times. In general, I don't think that's a helpful way to be.
No, it's not.
And then right? I mean, there's tons of men who we know fit exactly that, and none of them are great. And also, when you're dealing with a moment in your own life where you have incredibly strong emotions, if you think you're not supposed to have those, you're going to have a bad time. When I speak to young widowers, right? People, like I said, people call me in. Like I say, it's like the bat signal. When a young spouse passes away, somehow we get called.
Yep. W sign
And
goes up.
yeah, exactly. Especially young widowers, I go to them and I say, "No, when you feel like someone told me, I just feel like I'm going to cry all the time. So cry. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what
Crack
you're
on.
supposed to do right there. Your body is telling you to cry. Just do that.
I've
You're okay.
noticed.
You are still safe even when you are broken down. I know you've been trained to think that the opposite is true, that the only feeling of stability is stoicism. That's not going to help you right now.
No,
And for sure for young kids,
unspent tears can be damaging, can't they? You know that I've talked about it before, that lump you get, and I know that if I just have a little cry, it doesn't turn into a massive cry. You're not going to lose complete control all the time, but the more you bottle it up and the more you try and squash this feeling down, it's going to come out in some way, and that it might be crying, but it also might be destructive behaviours. It might be anger. It has to come out, and it does find a way. And actually,
I
probably the safest way is to have a cry.
I think so too. I know for myself, I know my grief cry. I still kind of fight it a little bit. And then when I do the inhale of breath after, I know I've done it.
Oh
And
my
then
god.
I know it's always that feeling is relief to
Yeah,
me. It's
and
kind
you've
of relief.
processed something as well. I get this, especially if
Something's
I have
happened, right?
like a breakthrough in therapy or something. You feel exhausted, but you feel like, oh, lighter. It's so powerful, isn't it? Talking about things, it really is.
And outpouring the emotion and having big emotions. I think those are all strength things that you can
Yeah,
do
they are.
when you're experiencing something with high emotions.
Yeah, because actually, and sometimes I find myself go, oh God, I'm sorry, I'm so upset, and I think actually, it was his birthday yesterday. Of course, you're going to be upset, and actually, you'd be a stone cold psychopath if you felt nothing. So
Right.
actually, feeling things is a reminder that you're human and that you care and that he existed. So you've just got to lean into it. I think sometimes it's easier to say that than to do it. Now, David, we have alluded during our chat so far that you have more children. Some would say that five was plenty, David. How many do you have now? Is it eight?
I just welcomed my eighth to the world
So
about
tell
three and
us
a
a
half
little
weeks
bit
ago.
about this, because presumably there's a new woman in your life.
Yes, there is.
So
Um,
tell us how you met.
we met on an very gently. Our daughters were in summer camp 2 years ago. We hadn't met since then. Before then, Bacheva had been divorced previously with two kids, Abby and Jacob. Her Abby and my Dorit were literally 2 weeks apart, like born actually 2 weeks to the day apart.
Now you've got more
And they
twins,
were in
technically, then.
and now right, we call them step twins. Yes, 100%. And they happened to be in camp together. And Bacheva sent out on the WhatsApp group for the bunk an invitation to Abby's birthday party. And I responded privately to her just to say no. I didn't know who she was, like no clue. Didn't know she was single. Like I had just some kid, just she was in my phone at the beginning as Abby's mom. And I just responded and she said, "Thank you for responding." Very few of the moms actually responded. And we hadn't met. So I'm like, well, I know I'm a dad in the group. Here's why. She's like, "Oh, I'm divorced." Anyway, we just started chatting and then met up for coffee. And then we got married last March. And then,
Congratulations.
thank you. And then welcomed a little baby girl, like I said, 1 month ago. We
Congratulations.
all live in my house, which is still here, just barely contains all of us, I think.
And is it the house you lived in with
Um,
Hindi?
yes, the house I lived in with Hindi. Now, the one thing, I mean, this sounds crazy, but Hindi died right as we were doing some construction because when we had 5 kids, we didn't fit. So we built it out a little bit. The An important thing in my relationship with Bacheva, that sounds crazy, but is real, is that we moved the master bedroom.
I get that. Yeah.
So Bacheva and I do not share the bedroom that was mine Hindi's. Like I say, Hindi's ghost does not haunt our new master bedroom. She was never in there. I somehow feel like that's important. I think it's in the book Option B. She writes, Sheryl Sandberg writes about how her friend told her to take her husband's photos out of her bedroom. She said, like, he said, this is your space now. It's okay. You're not removing him. You're not forgetting him. But this is your own private space right now. And it's okay for you to take your wedding photo out of your bedroom.
Mm,
Not that everybody needs to do that, but I can completely understand how that can just make a room feel different. I
yeah.
know Bacheva she moved into my house and sometimes she said, like, I don't always feel like this is my house. And that's a hard feeling. Like, that's a real thing and a totally valid experience for her. And we try to deal with that every day. She's not a widow. So
Yeah.
the things that you and Jonathan can say to each other and immediately understand. Bacheva and I sometimes have to talk that through and feel what that's like. And I think she
Yeah.
relies on me in a sense, and it's scary for her to rely on me to be able to do that in a healthy way and to have a new relationship in a healthy way, right? She has no control over my understanding or my feelings.
And it's quite a
She's wonderful and trustworthy, so it's been wonderful. She's great.
And it is quite an undertaking, isn't it? If you're not widowed, I mean, even if you are widowed yourself, but if you're not widowed, to have a relationship with somebody, because there is another person in your marriage, isn't there?
Yep.
She's not physically here, but her presence must be everywhere. There are 5 versions of, her genetics walking around your home. So yes, there are 3 of you in that marriage, and that must be difficult for somebody who's not in the same sort of stratosphere that we are. Does she,
Yeah.
I mean, how has she sort of adapted to it? Does she do reading, or, how do you learn how to support somebody who is grieving but also in love with you? It's a very complex position to be in.
You know what? That's a great question. You should have her on this podcast.
Maybe, maybe.
Yeah. I don't know all the complicated
Mm,
things that she goes through all the time. Obviously she was in a relationship that she didn't want to be in anymore. And, for very good reasons left. I'll respect her privacy and not talk about all that stuff. But yeah, she kind of she has expressed, at least. I don't know what she feels, right? She's her own person. She has expressed that she understands that, right, there's this third person. I don't know what she feels and thinks. All I know is what I can do. And what I can do is, to the best that I can think, is make her feel as loved as I love her,
yeah,
which is as much as I have.
yeah. And you
Yeah,
do. I've
it,
always said that
go
if
ahead.
we're sorry, we're both talking over each other
Yeah,
now.
we're great.
I've always said that when you're widowed, and you're widowed when you are in love with somebody, it's different because you don't have that tap switch off. You still love them. But in a weird sort of way, you haven't got the kind of bitterness and resentment that comes from falling out of love. So actually, you haven't been damaged in the same way. I'm sort of skirting around it because I don't want to compare divorce and death or say that one is, that they're equal, because of course they're not. But I do think you do come into a new relationship perhaps with a slightly more open heart. You're very cautious, of course, because particularly with children, you are potentially inviting a virtual stranger into their lives. But I don't know. I don't know. I think it is different. I think you do have this kind of openness and receptivity. Is that a word? To love. I don't know. I'm
I think that's
pontificating.
I think you're pontificating well. Dating, I think, as a widow is very different than dating as a
Mm,
divorced person. I think this is going to sound cruel, but I mean it with all the love in the world. No part of us thinks there's something wrong with me or I did that wrong,
mm,
right? We're no longer in a relationship by the hand of the universe.
mm.
And when we're looking for the next one, we will think that, hey, we're actually pretty good at this. We've done this once, we can do it again.
Yeah,
It takes time to get to think that and be open to it. I think anybody who's divorced, a little thing inside them goes, what did I do wrong? Or
yeah.
how did I get myself caught up in that? I think that I'm saying that with love because that's a hard feeling to have to deal with. I do think it is real for many, many people.
And actually,
And
I've got had
it's something to go over.
we've had a couple of guests on who've had this very complicated grief as well, where not only has their person died, but then they found out that actually they were living a different life or they were having an affair. And so then you kind of get the bitterness and the grief, which is a real melting pot of emotions. And probably not for this conversation, but yeah, we're talking about the complexities of grief. And I think that must be awful to have to contend with that. How do you move forward? How do you trust anybody? Yeah, I mean, I don't have answers for that, but I know some of our
I,
guests have lived it, and it's very difficult.
yeah, in general, how to move on or how to love again, these are all going to be complicated.
Yeah, and not everybody
Widows and divorced
does.
people
Not
alike.
everybody does.
Not everybody does, and that's fine. It takes time to think when you're going to notice that you're ready for it. If you are, if you want it, some people don't. It's complicated. It's just complicated.
David, I've just flicked over and had a quick look at your application, which you sent in. Absolutely, I can't even see when it came in, but it says on here that you have a baby on the way. So actually, your baby's been born.
There we go.
Applied. Isn't that lovely?
Perfect.
But I also wanted to just quickly ask you about your year-long adventure living in Israel. So you took all the 5
Mm.
children and you went to Israel. Tell me about
Yes.
this.
Yes. So right before COVID hit here, which was like March 2020,
Mhm.
Hindi had always talked about like doing an adventure of living in Israel for a year. It's
You have
something that some people in our
connections?
community do for Jewish. Like
Mhm.
that's really the connection. And as that 2020 started, I was feeling very strong as a parent, as a widower. I just felt very strong. Like, oh, we can do this.
Mhm.
I remember thinking before COVID, hey, life is a little short, right? This is something widows experience. Life is a little short. There's no time like the present to do something big and adventurous, a meaningful adventure. I'm not talking about like chasing adrenaline, but doing something really interesting and meaningful and fun.
Yeah, something that you maybe
And
would have put
then,
off.
yes, exactly.
Mhm.
And then when COVID hit, Israel happened to be a little more open than the United States, than New York was, at least where I am. And I just started the paperwork. It takes some time to like get a visa for everybody to go. I rented a house sight unseen. I had like one friend of my brother's who lived in this neighborhood that I thought would look cool. It was on the beach in Netanya was the city name. And I just went. I just took the kids. I'm like, guys, we're going to do this. We're going to have a great time. Will we stay there? I don't know. Will we come back? I don't know. I rented out my house. Like I found a renter. I found a place to rent there. It was just this crazy set of details to work out to take 5 children internationally for a year.
Especially
In a
during
place
COVID as well.
during COVID, where they don't really speak the language. I speak enough to get by there. And it was a wild ride between COVID and school closures and the neighborhood and me feeling, in the end, I felt like I was a little burnt out just as a parent. I'm like, let me go back to New York, get my feet sturdy again. Let me feel as strong as I did before I left. And then I can decide whether maybe make it a permanent move. I don't know. That summer was when I met Bacheva. The reason I hadn't met Bacheva the year before was because I was in Israel and she had gotten divorced and moved out here and enrolled her kid, Abby, in school. So like it just happened to be
Serendipity.
that this one adventure worked and ended in a way that no one would have expected. And it ended because a different adventure started. The adventure of blending a family and building this interesting life together and figuring out whatever happens next. It was it was it went great. Like the whole story is a great story. And that's the thing that I think about and look back on, like a great memories of me and the kids in Israel.
What I'm
Um,
hearing as you're talking is the way you describe your life as a series of adventures. And I think that's
yeah,
really amazing because not all adventures are easy and not all ventures are even pleasant. Some are terrible and traumatic and destructive, and losing Hindi was that adventure. But you had this wonderful adventure before with her and then the children, and then you've had these adventures since going to Israel and meeting Bacheva. Is it Bacheba? I'm conscious of my pronunciation. Bacheba? Close enough?
Batsheva.
Bacheva,
Close enough.
sorry.
Close enough. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah.
and like me, you must reflect on your life sometimes and think, yes, I've experienced an incredibly awful tragedy, but I've also been very lucky and I have loved and been loved by 2 people who, lightened and brightened my life and world in immeasurable ways. And to hear you talk about your new relationship and your blended family, I can hear that in your voice, that you're so grateful to have been given this other chance at having a different life, but a beautiful life nonetheless.
Yeah, it's something that it reminds me of something Bacheva would say about, dealing with me as a widower, is that, yeah, maybe if you had to choose the story, I wouldn't have chosen it this way from the beginning. But given today, I can choose whatever story happens next.
Yeah.
So given the circumstances that we met, what an amazing outcome.
Yeah.
Right? What a wonderful thing that we've done and are continuing to do. It's
Just to ask you, this is a purely really for my own sort of nosiness, because I'm obviously a stepmother and John's a stepfather
right.
to my children. How did the children adjust to this sort of step parenting dynamic? Was it plain sailing or there?
It's still ongoing, right? We're still blending constantly. We've both done a great job. I'll say that.
Yeah,
Because why not give us both tons of credit? There's still dynamics that are not seamless, but of course they're not
but
seamless.
that would
This
be
is
the
a
same in
crazy
any family.
blended.
This is,
It'll be in any family,
yeah.
exactly. So even the Reed and Abby, who are now 8-year-olds, step twins,
So I like
um,
twins.
they'll do things that to me just remind me of my multiples that I already have, and I just go, no, this is totally normal multiple
Yeah.
behavior.
Yeah,
Like people,
much like Hector and Holly, who are my two that are the same age, and actually I'm going to start calling them step twins. I'll love that. They bicker, they fall out, they make up. But I look at the other biological siblings, totally the same. Totally the same.
yes. People always ask, how does everybody get along? And I say, like siblings, which means
Yep.
sometimes they kill each other.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
that's,
yeah,
of
yeah.
course.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, if you haven't heard somebody screaming because they've been pinched discreetly, then you're doing it wrong, right?
Exactly.
Oh, well, David, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you and to hear your story properly. And I really love the way that you talk about both of your wives. Have you started calling Bacheva the alive wife yet? Because I don't know.
No, I have not. I did tell her that that's what you do, and she made a face, and I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I do. I think I posted on our Facebook, group a few weeks ago. I guess it was my anniversary. I can't remember. And no, I think it was my first anniversary of marrying Bacheva, and I posted on the page about something, and I wrote like, what I don't know what to call Hindi still. First wife sounds so
Divorce, doesn't it? And like trial run.
late wife acknowledges death. I don't want to do that.
Dead wife is harsh.
Dead wife is way too hard. So,
I find if I don't want to
alive
talk
wife
about it, I say first husband.
first. Yeah.
Yeah, and then once people know, I just refer to him as Ben. But yeah, it is a tricky one
Yes.
because by saying late or dead or belated, what's the word I'm looking for? Deceased. I don't know. I'm pulling words out of my head here.
No.
You automatically then pull that spotlight onto you, and I personally feel the obligation to explain with far more information than I probably need to. But sometimes you just don't want to, do you? Sometimes
I know. And sometimes you do want to. I don't know why. I know
Yeah.
you've had this. I think you shared also, like sometimes you just pull out the whole story. And
Oh,
you just
totally.
drop
Yeah,
it in the
sometimes
person's
it's
lap for no reason. You're not sure why you needed to do that, but you did it.
but maybe we needed to say it. Hey, maybe that
Yeah.
was some sort of primal need to say it. Well, thank you ever so much for coming on, and thank you ever so much for sharing your story and for talking so openly about what it's like to be a man, grieving the loss of his wife and how to support many children through. And it's also nice to talk to somebody whose life sounds even more chaotic than mine.
Thank you so much, Rosie and Jonathan. I'll say again, you guys are literally helping people with this. It's also fun to listen to, and I listen sometimes at night and just cry as I hear you guys talking to people or hear other people's stories, and it helps me personally, and I'm sure it helps a lot of people.
Thank you. It's so lovely to hear that, and I wish you every happiness in your wonderful patchwork life. And I look forward to seeing the children grow up on Facebook and things like that. So once again, thank you for joining us, and to everybody else, you take care of yourselves. I'll be back on Friday.